Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
It's like, I want to be there. Like, I want to be with these guys because this seems like fucking hot. Like, you ever hear a song and it's almost like a drug, and every time you put it on, it just hits you, and you're like, I have to hear this again. And every day you want to hear, like, oh, I get to hear that song again. And you put it on and it just like hits you, and you're like, it just gives you a fucking high. A webcomic called Daily Bred, blah, 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 bullshit. And they come out and he's like, yeah, we're gonna play our brand new record cover to cover. And I look at my buddy Tom, I was like, fuck this. I'm better than everyone. And all you had to be was just a little bit business minded, and you put yourself, it's like someone who can do a muscle up in the games puts themselves about like 30,000 people ahead of anybody else. You know, I was born to run. Yeah, it was born to run. I hate that fucking song. Every time you go in a record store, your mind just goes blank on what you're looking to buy. I don't know, man. I like creating all the time. That's why I do the podcast. That's why I do the comic. Sometimes you're like, I just gotta cry. I think that the way it went was the way it was supposed to go. Taylor Hand, bitch. This is Mike Doyle, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio.
Being at Motown is kind of what started my itch of wanting to create content. Not necessarily like make films, but do like a Jackass type deal, you know, surf videos that you were starting to see, the CrossFit Journal, stuff like that. And yeah. Since I've known you, you've been someone making content, whether it be digital media or making logos or digital effects for people. So you've always kind of been in that lane, and, you know, you have a podcast and it's pretty successful, and it talks about something that I'm really into is, you know, that pop punk scene in New Jersey growing up. I mean, we probably had different VFWs, but I'm sure we both grew up going to VFWs, watching shows and stuff. So I wanted to get on and talk to you about that stuff. But
yeah, man.
I guess to start off with, what do you got going on now with Drive 80, and kind of how has that evolved since we last talked?
So I started Drive 80 in 2011. It was about a year. I was already freelancing since 2005. 2006, I started freelancing full time. And then when 2011 came around, I was just doing everything. And then Drive 80 was just, I didn't want to freelance under my social security number anymore. So I created an LLC, and I'd done a bunch of different like partnerships and businesses, and I just realized that I'm not good being a partner with anybody. I don't know. I don't like to combine my future with someone. When I started Drive 80, it was do websites, print design, videography, photography, animation, all that stuff. And then like about a year into it, I was just frustrated, and I started working with a mastermind group. And then I was doing a lot of networking, and I was talking to this woman, and I read a book about just doing one thing really well. So then she had suggested just sticking with animation. So from 2000, like right at the end of 2011, I just went full on with animation, and it's just made my life way better because it's just very specific. So when someone wants to do a logo or any of the other bullshit I hate doing, I'm just like, nah, I don't do that. Like, this is my pricing, this is what I do. I have a very specific audience. And I don't know, man, I like creating all the time. That's why I do the podcast. That's why I do the comic. And because I just need that creative outlet that doesn't have limitations on it from a client. So it's nice to have the client thing pay the bills, and then the other stuff just be that release, which is nice.
How do you manage that? Does that ever get in the way of, hey, I just want to do the stuff I like doing, but this stuff is paying the bills, but this shit's way more fun?
I balance it pretty well because, like, for instance, the last 3 weeks, I had 2 projects where the summer was a little slow, and they were just spend a couple hours and design a storyboard and give it to the client, and then they're giving it to their client. So then you got a 4-day gap where you're just waiting. And then I'm doing some cold emails, doing some outreach, trying to find new clients. And then other than that, I'm like, all right, it's Tuesday. What do I want to do? And I've set my life up to be exactly whatever I feel like doing that day. I just do it unless it's a project, and then that takes on all of my time. And it took a really long time to finally get to this point, because like if I have a project that I'm waiting on checks to come in, or they've already come in, so it kind of gives me a little bit of padding for a minute, and then I just use that as my, I don't know, like I think I over stress myself with the animation thing for many years, and I was trying to do what everyone else was doing, and I found that as soon as I started making it my own, in my own voice, and doing it my own way, and just chilling out and not putting too much pressure on it, instead of being like, this company has to, I don't know why I got this in my head in the beginning, but it was like, this company has to give back. I have to give millions to nonprofits. I have to be a nonprofit. I have to do blah, blah, blah bullshit. And it was just really super stressful. And the moment I let go of that, it just like started to work, because it's like, I don't know, like you guys have seen it in running or wrestling or CrossFit or working out. When you try to mirror somebody else, it never feels right and it never works. But once you have your own thing, it's like everything opens up and it works for you. And that's just like pretty much what I let myself start doing. And I was like, okay, then I'm not going to hate my day. I'm going to get up and I'm going to wake up, slowly get into the day, go get coffee, go for a drive, listen to a podcast. When I feel like working, I'll work. Unless I have like a tight deadline, then I'm back in it. I'm not that willy-nilly with shit, but like I just took the stress out, and that like just involves me doing all this creative crap on the side.
Taking a step back, is there an origin story behind the name Drive 80?
Yeah, so I've been in like a bunch of punk bands when I grew up, and I came up with a theory that if you can say the band name to your mom without cringing, then that's a good band name. And when I started doing companies, like I think it goes back to like my first band name was me and my buddy. We called it Tyranian Purple. And then the second band we did was called Congress of Cow. And I just was always like, I didn't want to tell people that. And then the band that was popular for locally was called Lanemeyer. And that just like kind of rolled off the tongue. So everything I did after that was like, okay, I have to have it be like that. And so it was like right when 2011 started and I was starting the LLC, I had to register it. I was like, shit, I gotta come up with a name. So I wanted something that was generic, kind of like Google, not as big as Google, but Google just became Google. It was, but it's a search engine. It wasn't like Google's the search engine. It was just Google, so they can keep their door open to make whatever they wanted to. And I didn't want to call it like Drive 80. No, I didn't want to call it like the animation agency or the marketing thing. So I was driving on Route 80, going to see a movie. And I tell the story a bunch of times. Like I was listening to Dillinger Escape Plan, just like cranking Miss Machine in the first song. And I was like, let my brain just go. I was like, fuck yeah. I'm just like gonna go figure out a name. And I'm on Route 80. I was like, I'm driving Route 80. I was like, Drive 80, Route 80, Drive 80. That's cool. Because then I thought if I was doing a sales call with someone in Illinois or California or Wyoming, we initially, if we had nothing in common, we could say, oh, I don't know how it incorporate in the conversation, but like, yeah, like I live right off of Route 80. Route 80 actually goes through your state. And I thought that was just kind of gave it a little bit extra reason. And I've never had that conversation in 11 years with somebody. I never had someone go, does that like Route 80? And I'm like, oh my God, it's finally happened. So now I'm guessing like one day it'll happen. But yeah, so I wanted to keep it generic because I knew I would change my mind and eventually wanted just to be whatever I was going to make it. But it was based on driving on Route 80 in New Jersey.
And with the band names, is that a sort of a similar process of getting into a space where you're, brainstorming, or you and the band members sitting down and kind of, going back to CrossFit, like writing names on a whiteboard and doing that sort of stuff?
I've had a bunch of different experiences with that. So the Tyranian Purple name was my buddy Chris, who we were in Lanemeyer with. We were in the Congress Cow and Lanemeyer, or Congress Cow and Lanemeyer. he just thought of that because his grandmother was really religious, and she had heard that the Pope's robes were called tyranny and purple color or something. So he brought that to us, and I was like, all right. And then the Congress of Cow thing was, we were in the Rockaway Mall, and we were in some bookstore, and one of my buddies found a sex book, and it was like sex positions, and he was looking through it, and he's like, oh, I think it's Congress of a Cow or Congress of the Cow. And we're like, we'll just take the or the name out of it. We'll just do Congress of Cow, and it's like cool. It's like a sex position. And so that was that way. Then Lanemeyer, we were trying to think of names because it was an evolution of Congress of Cow, and we had 2 new members, and they're like, we're not calling ourselves this stupid name. And then the one guy was into 80s movies like us, and he was watching Better Off Dead, and he was like, hey, Lanemeyer is the name of the character. Like, let's call it that. Yeah. And then he was like, we could have it, we can have our first demo, we can call it I want my $2 demo. And we ended up like doing that. So that was a cool process. And then I did like another buddy. We had a thing called Revenge Clothing. It's my buddy Sean. He was the drummer in Lanemeyer. So he came up with that. And then the only other time I did it was I had a business partner. We were doing right before Drive A, we had this thing called Large Interactive. And Large, we got it from, we were like literally doing that whole thing you're saying. We're just writing shit down on papers, and it took us like weeks. And then we both like Garden State, and the lead character's name is Large. That was his nickname. So we were like, oh, Large Interactive, this is perfect. And it kind of had like a double meaning to it. Like, large, we're gonna get big. But yeah, that was that process. So it was always different.
All right. We're big fans of Better Off Dead over here. So
it's a great one.
Yeah.
Do you see that the guy who plays Chosen on Cobra Kai, they did a thing on him? It's like his first movies where he was the Howard Cosell speaking guy in the car who was always racing John Cusack. Okay. So everyone started tagging me. They're like, yo, it's Lanemeyer. This is fucking cool. I was like, thanks, Cobra Kai. Yeah.
Before you said you started Drive 80 in 2011 and were freelancing in 2006, and this was way before Instagram, NFTs, Reels, stuff like that. But as a digital creator, you're a lot ahead of the curve for a lot of people with all this stuff. So how has social media, NFTs, all that, how has that changed your business, if any? Do you think you were ahead of the curve and able to kind of use that stuff to your advantage, or is it a whole different realm?
I just have fun with, if I find a platform, I go with my gut on what's easy and what I don't feel I'm forcing out of it. And I also have limited certain platforms as what I'll use to put my stuff out on. I think some businesses, they try to do too much. So when I first got into it, I was a little kid, I was just drawing on paper. I'd have a note. I remember I first realized I was good at drawing because I had X-Men comics, and then I was Nintendo Power, and it was like Roger Rabbit game. So I was downstairs and I had that, and I just started replicating it to a T, and it looked exactly like that. And I was like, I think I was like 8 years old or something. I just like internally could do that. So the original was just paper, and then, excuse me. And then like later on, I was really big into taking photos of my friends and all that too. So before Instagram, I would take a ton of photos, and I'd use Flickr. So that got me into using stuff online. And then Facebook came out. I was like, I didn't really see Facebook. I used it more as, oh, this is kind of fun for doing like one-off little witty, stupid things that I'm thinking. So, and then it was just posting family pictures and stuff. Then Instagram came out, and I would post stuff with like my friends and family. But once it started to, when I started doing my comic, I saw the potential in, I don't have to have a blog. No one's going to click on a link to go do that anymore. It's on everyone's phone. It's just going to show up right away. I can get followers super fast. I could draw on, I was like, I like to do the digital medium with the physical medium. So every day I draw that comic, and then I take a photo. So I have physical stacks of the book, like still, but it's just like, it's super fast. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And then I had a client come to me a couple years ago who's a realtor, and she goes, can you do real estate gifts or stickers for Instagram stories? I was like, wait, I didn't know you can do that. Found out how you can do that, which is really easy. Plus, so then used my animation skills, started making those for my comic, and then uploaded just all these, and then every time I think of a new thing, it'll be like my character. In the beginning, I did a bunch where he's like just humping the air, and then he's like stabbing just with a knife, just stabbing. Because I was thinking like, what would people utilize, or what do I say all the time where I just put him on there? And so it's like every time, I don't know, like that stuff doesn't work for my animation company, or I haven't figured out how to make it work. So I stopped forcing it, and I really stopped putting a lot of time into it. I never use Twitter. LinkedIn, I absolutely love. Like LinkedIn is such a hidden gem for people who are creative because no one uses it. Everyone's afraid to talk on it. And I saw that as an opportunity. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. So I'm going to say whatever I want. It's like I keep it there. It's always business related. So it's like I find whatever these platforms are, it's what's like the rules, and how can I push them, or how can I use their technology, which I learn really fast, and then use it to my advantage, and then just make shit. I don't really answer the question.
Was when you discovered that you could draw at 8, was that something like going through school, like elementary school, middle school, high school, whenever art classes were presented, that you were scratching that itch, or was it still just something that you did at home and continued to do?
I never took any, I don't think I remember taking any art classes when I was younger. I just randomly started drawing. And then I remember I was in 9th grade. No, it was 9th grade? No, I was in 7th grade. And a buddy of mine knew I could draw. So he told his art teacher. So she approached me and she was like, you should take my class because you're really good at drawing. So then that led to me doing that. And then it's like, it was one thing I just kind of did in the background. I never really, I think there was like always an entrepreneur spirit that I had. I remember my dad bought me an airbrush when I was a kid because I don't know how I learned about airbrushes, but I remember I made
boardwalk.
I think it was like on the boardwalk and someone made a t-shirt or something. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then $300 later, I have the thing with the paint and the generator, or the air compressor. And I remember I was like, oh, I can make money with this. I think it was 10 or 11 at that point, because I knew people were doing airbrushing fingernails. And I was like, oh, for prom, I can make money doing that, and I can make t-shirts. So I remember I drew a flyer, and it was pricing and all this stuff, and I just created it in my house. So I had this idea that I would just work for myself and do this. And I never did anything with it because I was just like, well, I don't know. I don't have a car. I can't go to Kinko's. I don't know where to like advertise this shit. But like, so that was, so it was like, it did all this stuff. And then as soon as I started playing music in a band, I just gave up the whole creative thing. And then when the band broke up, when I was 21, when I was 22, I was about to be 22. It took me about 2 years to remember that I liked creating. But there was always this thing of like, the internet was cool. Like, so with the bands, we had CDs, and we didn't really have, the internet was kind of starting to take off. So we didn't really have that platform to market ourselves. And then then we broke up in like 2001. And so in 2002, 2003 to 4, the internet starts to really become super cool, and bands are starting to market. And I remember just like from the outside looking at that, I was like, fuck, man, if we were in a band, I would know how to utilize all this shit and start designing, or just doing all this, no one called it content, but just putting videos out and promoting the band. And so it was like 24. That's when I was like, oh, I can actually do graphic design. I didn't know it was a thing. I can do that old drawing thing I used to do and actually make it into a career. So then I went to school for it and just did like a 10-month technical school. And it wasn't really based on the theory, like design theory and any of that shit, but it was more like, that's where I like really focused on it and just made it, like, learned or beefed up my skills, I guess you could say.
Is that the same sort of, when you got into the music, was it straight to like guitars and drums and bands and that sort of stuff? Or I feel like every kid at one point dabbles in like 5th grade band and picks up a trombone or a trumpet or something like that, even if I only lasted for like a month, maybe.
I remember when I was a kid, I would go to my buddy's house, and like when me and my sister, we'd go to when my parents would take us to my aunt and uncle's house, we had our 2 cousins. So we would do radio shows. We'd record it on a boombox, and then we would annoy our parents by making them listen to it for 30 minutes. I remember my mom would just be like, this is murder. And it's like very much how I am now. If like anyone does that around me, I'm like, please stop. This is just fucking ruining my day. But we would creatively do that shit. And then when I was at my buddy's house, we would pretend that we were in like Bon Jovi. So we'd do shows where like for the adults, again, they must have fucking hated this, but we'd get like tennis rackets, put on sunglasses, put on like headbands, and put these like shows on. So as a little kid, I was like, oh, I want to play music in a band. So actually, it's kind of funny. Like all the things that I've wanted to do, I've literally finally gotten to do them. Even with the comic, I remember when I was in high school, or I was in middle school, there was a kid who would just draw this character. And I was just so jealous of him. I was like, I want to have a character. I want to be able to do this. And I made up this stupid design. I remember I can literally see it in my head. And it's weird because now I actually have this thing that I've turned into its own little world, this like comic that I do. And I've done like merch and books and just done all these things, made mugs and stickers and all this shit. And the music thing, when I met my buddy Chris, we were in the Tyrannian Purple band, the Congress Cow band, the Lamar band. He was really good guitar. So I was like, oh, we can do something instead of just having this stupid little garage band. And then we ended up doing it. And then we ended up like putting out CDs and touring and actually making it into something where we were like starting to get somewhere. And then it just fell apart because internally we were just a fucking disaster.
Well, I'm happy we kind of got back to the music side of things. So I consider myself an emo kid, and just to clarify, when I was growing up, an emo kid was like hemp necklaces, fag flips, and soccer jackets. It wasn't like makeup and painting your nails. It was like starting line, something corporate, June Spirit. Like that was emo. And when I met you and I met Pete up at Motown, you guys were all into the same music, and that's kind of how we bonded. And then, you know, like you said, we go your separate ways. You follow people throughout the years, and then I see you're doing the podcast. I always knew about the band. I was like, following the podcast out of the corner of my eye, and then you see like dude from Strung Out, dude from RX Bandits. He's on there, and he's like stoked to be on there to talk to you. I'm like, wait, what is going on here?
That was crazy.
But so like, I guess the question I'm trying to ask is kind of what got you into punk music, pop punk, emo. What were kind of the bands that you were listening to growing up?
I always liked, when I was little, I remember getting the Tone Loc tape cassette for Christmas or my birthday. And I would get that, or I got like my sister, she would have Warrant and Poison and all these, and Bon Jovi, Motley Crue. And I remember she had a Joan Jett 7-inch, and she had this little, those record players, little 7-inch record players, there's the box, you turn it, you'd open it and play it. And I would just always go in her room and play I Love Rock and Roll, like all the time. And when the 80s music came out, I loved music, but I was like, there's just something, even as a kid, I'm like, here's what the guitar solo is going to be. Here's what it's like, you knew, even at 6 years old, I knew what was going to happen. And I just felt like, I was like, oh, these bands, like, they're not doing something for me. And then like everyone says, Smells Like Teen Spirit comes out. I see the video. It blows my fucking mind because it scared the shit out of me. It's like this dark gymnasium, and I think I was 11 at the time. No, I think I was 10 at the time. So I'm seeing like these hot girls with tattoos as cheerleaders in this like dark setting gymnasium, and like they're playing, and I was like, I want to be there. Like I want to be with these guys because this seems like fucking hot. Like this seems great. And then Nirvana, or then Pearl Jam comes out, Soundgarden. So that, what I wanted was something with an edge, and then I stumbled into Helmet and Tool, and those like, so really the theme was whatever scared the shit out of me I would go for. And then Tool was way scarier than Nirvana and Pearl Jam, so I was like, I went in that direction. So I'd listen to all that stuff. And my buddy Chris, he got into punk rock, I think through Bad Religion or No Effects or something like that. And so when we hung out, when all my buddies we like my buddies to this day, there was like a handful of us. We'd be driving around in the car and they'd be making mixtapes and be fucking Face to Face, Lagwagon, No Effects, Pulley, Strung Out. Who else is in this thing? Like then it started getting like Mineral, Jimmy Eat World, Knapsack, all these other emo bands. And when we started playing in the bands, so we were in this punk band and I liked listening to Tool and stuff, but I liked playing punk music because me and Chris would play Face to Face covers and things like that. So that started kind of flipping me into liking punk rock, even though it was like, oh, it's not like Tool or Helmet, it's not really heavy. And I had a Tool sticker on my bass when we were playing, and my band members, before we played our first show, they're like, yo, you gotta like get rid of that sticker because that's really uncool. So I ended up putting it on the back of my bass. So it was kind of like my rebellion, I guess. It was like, it was still there, but it was hidden. It was like, oh, my Tool sticker's still there. It's like that wrench that looks like a dick. You know the thing?
Mhm.
And so that is like, then I started listening to more punk stuff. And then I started buying like MXPX, I bought Lagwagon. I think I bought like Haas and then got Trashed and then Duh, and just started loving that. And I started going to Warped Tour. So that really just, then it opened up into just really listening to a lot more punk rock and then buying it on my own.
Did you guys play the Warped Tour back in the day?
Nah, never got a
No.
chance to. Yeah, it's like,
Bamboozle?
nah, I have always said on the podcast that my biggest goal was to play Irving Plaza or like Roseland, and I never got a chance to do it. So the band Landmeyer, we played in Arizona. We did 8 tours with that band, and the last one we did, you know the Lawrence Arms? You ever heard them?
Yeah, hell yeah.
So we toured with them for 2.5 months, and that's when Brian Fallon was in our band. He's the guy from Gaslight Anthem.
Dude, they're playing in Denver tonight, and I've been
really?
I've been debating if I should go or not because I have an assignment due tomorrow, but it's killing me right now.
I feel like that's kind of like your
cue?
sign. Your sign. Your sign
I can't
to go.
believe you were in a band with Brian Fallon. That's crazy.
So when we were in the band, it was me, Chris. We were the dual singers. Chris sang the most of the songs, and then Sean was playing drums, and then we had a revolving door of guitar players. So Casey was the final one. Chris quits the band right at the end of our 7th tour at 6 a.m. He gets up and he's like, I don't want to do this shit. He quits. We end up finding Brian because he was in this band called Surrogate Mackenzie. We were just put the word out, we're looking for guitar players. He ends up coming and playing with us, and then we took him on his first tour ever with the Lawrence Arms. So that's where they became really good friends. And that's where like the Lawrence Arms, they have like that Suicide King tattoo. You ever see that?
Yeah.
4 of the guys on the tour, that's where they got it, was on that tour. And it took like forever. It was like 4 hours. I was like, can we fucking leave already? And I think it was Sean from my band, Dan, who was the roadie for the Wonder Years, Brendan, and I think it was Brian. I think he also got it. So it was kind of like our whole thing, but then they ended up blowing up, and like Brian really blew up, which is so cool. And him quitting the band was the reason like why I was like, all right, I'm done with this shit. But we toured the Lawrence Arms, and I totally forgot where I was going with that.
Well, I think I was just asking kind of about like big shows or big bands. That you
Oh,
played
okay, yeah.
with or
So
toured with.
we were on tour we're on that tour, and we're in Arizona at this place called the Nile, and it's this huge club, but downstairs there's this basement where they do the smaller shows. We were playing there, and we had time to kill before the show, so I ended up walking upstairs, and I remember walking out on the stage, empty auditorium, no one's there, and I was like, we're gonna play here one day. It's like, we're gonna sell this place out, we're gonna like make it. And it never happened, and it always has irked me that like we never got that chance to play that big of a place.
What
Still
what
time.
year? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
still time. It could happen.
Well, I want to go back to 2 things. It's funny you mentioned Helmet and Jimmy. You said bands that kind of just get forgotten, and Helmet was one of those. And this was pre-pandemic. We were out about walking to downtown Denver, and one of the venues or whatever they had, Helmet had just been in Denver. And I was like, holy shit, Helmet. And everyone was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, the band. And that like set me on like a, like a month long, like revisiting my teenage years of just, blasting that and being angry and just raging a little bit.
Actually, real quick,
yeah.
quick. Do you run to music or do you run to silence?
I used to run to music. I don't anymore.
Actually, I think I took a note from somebody like I do it in silence, but over you like when you work out, do you listen to music or do you just run? Yeah.
No, I still, lift and do that sort of stuff.
Wilma's Rainbow and Milk Toast are like the best
Yeah.
songs to work out to. They're so fucking great. Yeah.
And then the other question I had for you, with all the music in your collection, do you still possess all those CDs from your teenage years, or are you a digital guy now?
So I mean, I became really reliant on downloading and Spotify when iTunes happened. Then I started buying records. Now I'm buying vinyl like all the time. I'm actually looking at my collection. I think I've got, I don't even know, 100, maybe 200 records. Like it's stupid. And I just bought my record player a couple of years ago, and I think I've spent like $10,000 in the last couple of years. So I'm buying records of things that I have downloaded, but now I'm getting them, I'm getting them on vinyl. So even records that I never even bought back in the day, they just, for some reason, when you see them on vinyl, you're like, I have to have this, because I never would have bought the Eminem CDs, but I have both of his first records like on vinyl. I've got the Chronic, but then I'll have, what else do I have? Like I just got Head Automatica and then Glassjaw, and I just got like, and I never bought Bad Religion CDs back in the day, and now I've got Suffer. I just got Against the Grain, Generator, and the one with Sorrow on it. I forget the name of that one. So now I'm buying things now, and I just found a couple years ago. It was a couple years ago. I had my old CD case, the booklets, books. My Jeep has a CD player in it. And I was visiting my mom in Savannah, and she's like, "Oh, here's this box. You left all this stuff when you sold everything and traveled." And I took it out. I was like, "Holy shit, I have my CDs." So I do have a bunch of them, but some of them are kind of scratched. And then every time it rains and I forget to put my roof on my Jeep, there's like a puddle or a lake in my Jeep. So they were kind of soaking in water a few months ago. And I kind of let them dry out, but I think they're a little bit more warped now.
Bummer.
Yeah, but yeah, so I still have old shit like that. Like I found some Coalesce CDs and all this crazy stuff.
So are you going to like record stores specifically to look for old stuff? Or are you like buying like new releases from bands and stuff that they're putting out on vinyl now too?
It's kind of like, it's mostly new releases. There's a record store, because I'm in Raleigh, and there's a record store called Sorry State that is 3 blocks from me, if that. And they're a tiny little spot where you just go and buy records. They just sell vinyl. So they have like a mix of old stuff, but then they'll have new releases of old. Yeah, how do you say that? New releases of old releases? Like whatever.
Re-release?
Re-release, thank you. Yeah, a re-release. A reissue of like an old thing, but then it'll be color vinyl, which is super cool. But mostly there's a record store that I also go to. It's a bar it's beer on tap and records.
That's awesome.
So cool. It's so fucking dope, and it's called Hunky Dory. And you go there, you get a beer, you do a lap, and they have like hip hop and they have punk and they have just this. So I always go to like the featured records, and that's where they'll do like stuff for St. Rich. They'll have the newer stuff of old releases. Or then the other day, I just bought Lizzo just for the fuck of it, just because I was like, oh, I have to have this on vinyl. Like this is pretty cool. But then after like 2 beers that are 8% each, there's like $100 worth of vinyl, and you're like walking out there like, fuck.
So talking about the record store, I feel like I have to ask, especially the guy who's the host of This Was the Scene, what was your CD store life like? Did you have a CD store that you were going to on the reg growing up? Were you getting stoked for Tuesdays? Did you have a hookup to get the new releases on Mondays like we did at Rockaway Beach? Was that a thing for you or no?
We would go to Sound Exchange in Wayne. So my dad lives in Packanack Lake in Wayne, New Jersey. And so do you know Wayne at all? Have you been there?
I've heard of it.
No. So you grew up in Rockaway Beach?
No, we grew up in Point Pleasant.
No, the CD store was called Rockaway Beach.
Oh, okay. But yeah, it's right. You guys are beach guys, which means that you would have no reason to go to North Jersey at all. but you
CrossFit
were up.
Morristown.
I was to say, so you were there. Weren't you driving back and forth?
Yeah,
Fuck,
crazy.
I remember you told me that one time. I was like, you're an idiot. Why are you doing that? I think, yeah, it was like an hour and a half drive or something crazy.
Yeah.
So in North Jersey, there was Flipside, which was in Pompton Lakes. And that's where we met this guy, Alan Rappaport, who basically educated all of us on bands. Like he introduced my friends to Jawbreaker, Mineral, Jimmy Eat Worlds, all these like emo like bands, Jawbox and things like that. So we'd go there, we'd go to, and that would be if we were we would just do that after school because we were bored and we like two of us had our licenses, so we just cram all of us into their cars and go, and we'd have no money, so we just get stuff out of the free bin probably. And I remember like I kept a list of CDs I wanted in my wallet because every time you go in, it still happens every time you go in a record store, your mind just goes blank on what you're looking to buy. And so I had a little tiny piece of paper, so I'd take it in my wallet. I'm like, oh my God, I remember this time. And we go to Sound Exchange on Route 23. So my dad lived in Packanack. He lived about a mile from Taco Bell. So me and my buddies would go there on the weekends. And then Saturday morning, we would take a walk, smoke cigarettes, go to Taco Bell,
Shit your pants.
shit our pants afterwards. Yeah, 100%. What was they had like one? It was like a bacon cheeseburger burrito back then.
Oh God.
Oh, God, I loved it. So fucking good. We're walking back. We're like, we have a mile to go. We're just got the shit in the woods. And so then we'd walk over to Sound Exchange, which is still there. I went there last year when I was visiting New Jersey. Still smells like carpet that's been there since like the 60s. It's gross. And I think that was it. And then CD Worlds, you had a card. So then I think I would go there on Tuesdays when they had new releases and you got like a discount. And there was someplace in Denville that I went like a couple times. There was someplace in Montclair I went one time, but I forget the name of it. And then I just went to, oh my God, it just closed.
Jack's? Was it Jack's that just closed?
No, it's right by Bound Brook on 287. Oh my God. It's like super, super famous. I can't think of it. It just closed last year. Fuck, I gotta Google this. But yeah, so those are the places I went to. I gotta look this up.
I can relate with having that older dude at the CD
Vintage
store.
vinyl.
Vintage
Vintage vinyl. That was it. Yeah.
There you go. Where
It's
is that? Was that Red Bank?
No, I always thought it was close to Union for some weird reason, but it's down 287. I think it was like exit 9 or something like that. It was way closer than I thought it was growing up. Yeah, it's Gonzo.
Yeah, I always had the dude at the store. He kind of knew my taste, and he'd always like hit me to stuff that would kind of expand your horizon. I remember hitting me like Paul Weller, The Odd Numbers. He gave me May's first CD. He's like, I think you'd like this. I also remember him playing like before I even knew who Taking Back Sunday was, their first album, and that first song, and that just like I remember that like it was yesterday. Him like, yo, check this out.
Dude, I remember when I was living in San Diego, there was this guy, Corey, my buddy James Grice. He became like my best friend out there, and he's like, dude, you gotta listen to this Taking Back Sunday. And I was just very jaded about what the scene was turning into. It's like why I have my podcast. Well, even though I do like a lot of those bands, and now and then I like love Take Back Sunday. But at the time, AP Magazine was coming out, and everything was a fashion show, and everyone looked like a fucking moron. And I just like absolutely hated it. And I was so jaded because my band didn't make it, and I was like, fuck this scene and fuck these bands. So he's telling me about Taking Back Sunday. I was like, dude, I saw them play with the Lawrence Arms in front of nobody. The guy sucked on stage. I was like, no. He keeps telling me about it. And then this guy, Corey, we became friends because I started this band out there called Arcade Academy. And it was the two of us, me, James, Corey, and this guy, Mike, who was in this band called John Cougar Concentration Camp. They're like a kind of popular. Yeah. They were like a pretty famous or pretty popular punk band. Yeah. They would like throw bales of hay at the crowd and stuff at the end. And
are they on Spotify?
They're on Spotify. Yeah. Yeah. It's very like grungy punk rock. And Corey, we're talking to him, and he's like, yeah, Take Back Sunday, that CD's great. And I was like, whatever. He goes, yeah, I just had to buy it for the 4th time. I was like, why? He goes, because I just play it so much. I just ran all 3 other CDs in the ground. Immediately went out and bought it that like next day, and put it in, like you said, that first song, like I was just like, it just took me through the whole record. And then I listened to it again and again and again. And I just bought the re-release that they just put out on vinyl. And it's so fucking, they're so good. I've seen them play. They played at Cat's Cradle out here in Carborough a couple years ago. And they come out and he's like, we're gonna play our brand new record cover to cover. And I look at my buddy Tom, I was like, fuck this shit.
Right.
It's like, you gotta be kidding me. So then they leave, they come back out and they're like, all right, now we're gonna blow this place up with like all the hits. And the place went like fucking crazy. It was so amazing. Like he's jumping around it was the coolest thing I think I've ever seen. And they just slayed. So yeah, huge fan.
You were saying that there was that point in time where there was a little bit of bitterness and that you were kind of seeing the scene side of everything and the commercial side of it with the record industries and what have you. And I heard Buddy from Senses Fail on a podcast. He was talking about how Fall Out Boy was the right band with the right label at the right time. And there was 10 other types of bands that could have been that Fall Out Boy if they had that right push. Do you think, is there any one or two bands that kind of come to your brain that should have been the Fall Out Boy, or that could have been the Fall Out Boy, or that could have been the band to rep for pop punk that never was heard of?
I think that the way it went was the way it was supposed to go. I think there's bands out there. Some bands just have this magic for some reason that they, like Newfound Glory, but Newfound Glory was great. And as soon as they started, they wrote so many poppy songs. The next album, so many poppy songs. The next song, like all of these really popular songs. They just like started playing, and the world just kind of carried them to the stratosphere. And they can still tour. They're not selling stadiums out, but they're selling clubs out, and they still rock. And they just had this magic when you saw them on stage. And I've heard of people say that this band should have been that big band and stuff, but there was just some reason they just didn't have that magic. Or kind of to my point, what I was talking about earlier about the whole Drive 80 thing, about like being good at one thing really well. I think at the same time, if bands had a business sense and they knew their target market, they should just like live in that space somehow and try to match the bands that would take them in front of those crowds, or play festivals that are specifically like, you have to play to that audience that's going to eat you up. It's like Hot Water Music still plays, they still tour, they still sell places out. But like, I was talking to Jason, who's their bass player, and he's like, people just didn't really get what we were doing. But the people that did get it thought they were gods. The people who didn't get it, they were like, what is this fucking noisy bullshit? And I could say there are some punk bands out there that I was like, you guys should have gone all the way. But in talking to them, they just weren't built for it. Like Newfound Glory, I talked to Ian. He was like the brains behind them getting big, which is so funny because he's just like the quiet bass guy on stage who played with a shirt off when he was like, back in the day, which he hates doing now. And he whispered into the ear of the label, he's like, yo, you got to get the rest of the guys to tour. It's the only way this thing's going to work. Because he is like, I was like, did you know you were going to be? He's like, yeah, I knew it. He's like, all I wanted to be was a giant rock star. And I've talked to other bands where people thought they should have been big. And I was like, what were your thoughts? What'd you want? They're like, well, I don't know. I didn't really, like, I think we got where we wanted to. Like, they didn't think bigger. And a lot of them didn't go anywhere. So it's this weird mix, but I think it went the way it was going to go. Like Pete Wentz in general is kind of like the Gabe Saporta of the later scene. Like Gabe Saporta, he was in humble beginnings, then he did Midtown, and then he's very business minded. And all you had to be was just a little bit business minded, and you put yourself. It's like someone who can do a muscle up in the games puts themselves about like 30,000 people ahead of anybody else. That one trick. Or even if you can get 10, then you're like the top 1%. Like that's the kind of thing. If you know business, it's like you're able to do a muscle up at a local CrossFit gym. Like you're like the superstar. So he ended up doing that, and luckily they wrote catchy songs. Pete Wentz, for some reason, he just had this magic. And Fall Out Boy, when they were in Chicago, like everyone lost their fucking minds over them before they were Fall Out Boy. So there was just this thing that you're just like, you can't explain it of like why it works.
Well, I think they get a bad rap. I like Fall Out Boy. I think Take This to Your Grave, man. That is, as far as like early pop punk album, I'll give that to anyone. Like anyone who's like, oh, I like Fall Out Boy. I'm like, if you listen to Take This to Your Grave, they're like, no. I'm like, well, you don't like Fall Out Boy.
You're not a purist, bitch.
Yeah, and I try not to be that guy, but that's my youth. I used to cut weight to that album. That's like got a special place in my heart. But I really liked your answer on that, and it's interesting to hear that because there's different perspectives on those things. I always thought Start in Line was one of those bands.
I was just thinking of them. They do well. I mean, they still tour and do really well. They were a local Jersey band that got picked up by Drive Thru and then like just put out there and did well. But I don't know, they like some bands they're just missing some beats. It's almost like, what's that band today? Not, oh my God. It's two names. They're kind of like a hardcore Newfound Glory. Shit. It's not 4 Years Strong. I can't think of it. It's like the lead singer has a beard. They're kind of hardcore, but they have like these poppy songs.
Not I Prevail.
No. Oh my God, it's gonna drive me crazy. When they play, like they're a band that like I'm gonna think of it. It's gonna come to my head, but they're one of those bands that are like that Fall Out Boy thing that I see them live, and I'm just like, I don't fucking get it. Like the guy has the same scripted bullshit when he plays. He's like, "What's up, Raleigh? Raleigh, let's fucking go." Hey, Raleigh, what's up? I was like, we get it. You know where you are. Like, you're like going through the movements, and people just lose their minds over it. And some of their songs are cool, but then they have this like weird hardcore-y like screams, and this it doesn't make any sense. And I'm just like, but for some reason the whole place is losing their minds over it, and you're just like, oh, okay.
So
on their niche.
Yeah, right.
I want to Google this as you're asking me this question.
Mike, you posted once on Facebook when Saves the Day put out an album. We were like, I don't know how you're like in your 30s still writing songs about heartbreak and getting your heart broken in high school or whatever. Do you still feel along those same lines? Can you still get down with some of the emo pop punk stuff, or is it a little out of date just based on your age?
I think it's the way that they word it. I can listen to the songs that I did, and like I'll be like, oh, that line. Oh, it's like some bands just get super poetic, and they're 16 years old, and I'm like, I get it. I can remember that. I mean, like Chris from Saves the Day, though, I forget what I posted about that, but I mean, his lyrics, they hold up. I think they really hold up. When I got divorced, I remember like prior to that, I would write on Facebook. I'm like, the reason, I was like, what was I say? I was like, bands who write really sappy songs, they just don't realize they're just in a shitty relationship and they should just break up, And it was that whole thing of it's not you, it's me. I 100% believe it's true. Whatever reason there's a breakup, it really is. No one really does anything to somebody else. It's they do something, and it's like how you perceive it and what you do with that emotionally. It's all on you. If you want to be mad, it's on you. If you want to be happy for them, it's on you. It's like they can't do this. So when the people write these songs like "You ruined my soul" and "You ripped my heart out through my ass," you're like, they really didn't. They just decided they didn't like you. So I remember saying this, and then I got divorced, and I was just so mad. And I wrote 2 songs. They're really depressing, and I recorded them, and they're like, but there was like a couple lines where I was like, oh, those are really good. Those are pretty good lines. And I'm in my 30s. And then I would listen to, I remember the things like, when I don't know if you guys have been through like a really awful breakup, but you just go into this, if it's a relationship, it was really strong, or you thought it was strong, like you go into this massive depression, which I did. It was like, I was just angry. I remember, but I was listening to bands like Story So Far, and they did this cover. I think it's called they have a song called Clairvoyant, and they did a cover of this other band. It's on the same CD as Clairvoyant. I would put that shit on and just lose it. Like fucking like, sometimes you're like, I just gotta cry. I'd put that shit on and just lose my mind. And these are 21-year-old kids who are writing these songs. So I think that if it's worded correctly and there's something in like the note of a song, like you ever hear a song and it's almost like a drug, and every time you put it on, it just hits you and you're like, I have to hear this again. And every day you want to hear, like, oh, I get to hear that song again, and you put it on and it just like hits you and you're like, it just gives you a fucking high. Like it's this perfect storm of lyrics just really have to hit you where you are at that point. If they're really cheesy, you can let yourself believe it, but I think if you're at a certain age, you realize, all right, bro, like what are you trying to tell me? You're a bit too sensitive right now. But if they word it properly, it can just dig into you so well, and you're like, all right, this is doing it for me.
Do you have any thoughts on Pennywise?
I loved Pennywise. I just when I was at Sound Exchange last year, I bought About Time on CD for the first time. I saw it in the used it was like $4 or something in the used bin. And to your point, like I didn't really buy a lot of those CDs back then. I was just listening to my buddies' cars. Now I'm like, I have like I forgot that. I have all the first 3 face-to-face releases on record. But Pennywise, I liked the first 2 records because they were on every single skate video back then. That's how we found out about those guys. And then they did the one where they have Broham live at the end, where the whole crowd
Live at the Key Club.
No, it wasn't. Either that's where it was, but it was their 4th release where it's the black one with that's their symbol. Yeah, so they were playing there.
I think
It's like
that's
the whole
what it's
crowd.
called. Yeah.
No, the CD. No, it was called like
Full Circle.
Full Circle. Yeah,
All right.
that was a good record. But that's like a lot of bands. I think you have a certain amount of records, and after that, you're like, why are you still making records? It's really not. You should probably stop.
I don't go to many shows these days, but I think if I were to see them pop up, I would probably be that old guy in the back drinking a PBR, just because I always go back to like Blink 182, and every time I've seen them live, they've been so awful compared to like their albums. But like, Pennywise and live and Pennywise and an album, it seems like it's pretty much the same kind of just hard, vocals, and Fletcher might get a little too drunk, but otherwise, it's to me, it's always been a solid show. Yeah, I mean, the notes that Jim hits, I think that's the singer's name. They're not like, he's really not stretching, not to take anything away from him at all, but he built a vocal range that he can consistently stick with, and he's on it the entire time. I saw them play, I think twice. I saw them play at Warped Tour 97 when they were in Asbury Park, and Fletcher was like, you see that sound guy right there? I want you to do a circle pit around him. Yeah, I was there. Were you there for that? Remember that shit? Yep. And then the entire play. Awesome. I remember I stood back. I was like, there's like, to me, it looked like 1,000 people just running like a stampede in a circle around that. Then like the sound guy was like, oh shit, I'm gonna die. Yeah. That's awesome. That's blast from the past, the Warped Tours of the late 90s. That was the one where Blink played. That's where Dude Ranch came out, and they played as a 3-piece with their old drummer who was really bad, and they sucked. They were so bad live, but they're like, oh, it's Blink again, another band. For some reason, they just got taken to the top. But then Mark Hoppus and Tom DeLonge were both really good businessmen, and they're good gazillionaires now. One might be in the CIA. I know. I see all those interviews. He was on Rogan when he was talking about all that shit. And then Travis Barker's on it afterwards. And Joe's like, yeah, had Tom on. He's an interesting dude. And Travis like, he's not in the band anymore. I know. He's just like, yeah, we're friends. And he would just get high and just talk about aliens all the time, man. And this is Travis saying, and Travis like, okay, cool, man. Yeah, that's great. It's like, fuck.
Mike, so as far as the podcast goes, who has been a really big surprise that you've got that's answered you back? Do you only have people that you tour with, or have you built a big enough name where you can reach out to people, bigger names, and get them? How does that work? Who's really surprised you? Has there been anyone that we'll cut it out if not, that's been kind of a jerk? Is there a list of these are my golden gooses that I want to get as interviews?
Yeah. As far as the jerk thing, I've literally lucked out. This will be episode 192 this week. And like a couple of them were just like, one was a Q&A, two of them are me just saying, hey, I'm just taking a break or something. I've literally had 0 like dicks. And every time I start an interview, I'm always not nervous. Sometimes I really just don't want to do it. Like, because there'll be some people have asked me, can we do it at 9:00 at night? I'm like, I'll write back. I'm like, look, man, I love this podcast, but I don't love it enough to do it at 9:00 at night. I'm like, so you got to meet me halfway and do it earlier. I'll even do a Saturday. So I literally haven't had a dick one. And there was some interviews where I did it where I was like, shit, I don't know if I got a lot out of them. And then I went through the edit and it came out like, so a lot of those where I'm like, I don't think this was that good. And I'll edit it. And I'm like, this is one of my favorite ones. And those would be just some random one. It's really easy to get people to come on. Now it's actually, there's a bit of a wave where people are like, yeah, I've heard of your podcast. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like Dennis from 88 Fingers Louie, he reached out to me really early on Facebook. It's like, dude, I love your podcast. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Dennis from 88 Fingers Louie. I'm like, do you want to be on it? He's like, yeah, sure. So I got him on it. I reached out to William Goldsmith from Sunday Day Real Estate, and I was supposed to have him on. He emailed me that day. He's like, hey man, I'm having like some personal shit. I can't do it. I was like, fuck. All right. I was like, that's cool. That's cool. And I just like kind of like, I was like, all right. Anyone else, I'm like, fuck it. I'm like, I'm gonna keep just pounding. I was like, all right, cool. And then he finally said, yeah, and I got him on. And so he ended up just accidentally being episode 100. And Sunday Day Real Estate is like, I have like the tattoo of the third album on my back. Like I met Jeremy Enick one time and showed him it, and because he has a tattoo on his arm. Like I did a design for Jeremy Enick one time when he was on tour that he used as a shirt design. Like I love this fucking band. And I was freaking out. In the beginning of the interview, I literally start going off the rails, just selling how much I love them. And my buddy texted me. He's like, hey man, I'm really glad you pulled it together, because the first 10 minutes, like you just started going off the rails and then you just pulled it back in and it was good. I was like, all right, cool. Brian from Saves the Day, that was a really big one. He was so easy. Like I posted in a Facebook group, like, does anyone know where Brian is? I didn't want to talk to Chris because there's like this big scandal thing going on with him right now. And I was like, he's just told the story too many times. So I try to find someone who, I like finding people that are really obscure. Sometimes I'll go for like a bigger person. Like I've been offered, or someone suggested Fletcher from Pennywise. And I was like, that guy has just done so many interviews. He's not going to be excited about it. I'm going to be intimidated. I just don't want to do it. And, but with Brian, as I was like, I think Brian would be the best because he was there from the beginning. And I think he would give me a real story. And he did. Like he was just like talking about how much drugs they did and like it's such a fucking good interview. And then Rich Egan from Vagrant, that was crazy because I interviewed this band called Boxer, which is their first release. He messages me on Instagram and he's just like, yo, that was an awesome interview. I fucking love Boxer. I was like, do you want to be on the podcast? He's like, yeah, but any other time, I found the best way for me to get someone is I'll leave them a message. I don't care who it is. Like I'll just like, I think I reached out to like the bass player from Bad Religion. He didn't get back to me, but like I'll just take my shot, especially usually after a few bourbons. I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna go interview this guy. I'm gonna just send him a message. And the best thing is you send them a message and then you go on their feed and go way down to like, because no one even looks at the old posts at all. I'll go to an old post and just be like, hey, and I'll comment, hey, I left you a message. And that they'll see that, but the messages they won't see because it'll go into like the non-general one.
Bro, I needed this tip 3 years ago when we started the podcast.
Yeah. That I did that accidentally because I would realize I was like, wait a minute, when people comment, I always see it. But when they send me a message, it'll be a week later, 3 weeks later. And I'm like, oh shit, sorry, I didn't see this. So I just did the 2. And then I would go and click on their link of whatever, sometimes like a link tree or something. And then I would go, if they have a web page, I find their email and email them. And then I'll look them up on LinkedIn, which majority of people are on there, and I'll message them, I'll request them and then I'll message them. Like that's how I just got this interview coming up, because I found that he was on LinkedIn and I messaged him and he was like, oh yeah, I'll totally do this. So there's little tiny, like little tricks that you can do that just get you in front of people. But I don't give a shit. I'm not afraid anymore of reaching out to people.
Do you have a top 5 of gets that you want?
I think I wrote a list when I first started the podcast. I wrote it on a piece of paper because I think that I always tell some people too, when they have an idea, they think too hard, like, oh, I need a website. I need all this first. I'm like, just write what it looks like on a piece of paper because it makes it real. So I took my own advice. I was like, okay, I'm gonna write on a piece of paper. Here's who I want to get. Reached out to all of them. I think like 8 out of 10 said yeah. And then I think on that list, I had Chris Connolly from Saves the Day, but then I ended up getting Brian. So that was a bigger win for me. I would love to get Brian from Gaslight on just to talk about his experience, like us being in a band together. I think it would just be a really interesting interview because it didn't end on a great note, but I think some people would think that if they were in a band with him, they'd be jealous of his success. And I've never been. I'm like, this is so cool. But I want to talk to him because he was on Brendan's from Lawrence Arms podcast and they did like a side thing and they talked about our band and they kind of talked shit about it a little bit. So I wanted to get him on and be like, all right, let's really talk about this. I'm like, A, you weren't fucking friends with Brendan back then and then you became friends with him after. I'm like, B, you were fucking weird. Like, so, but like say this shit to him, in a friendly way. I can get away with it. Like I can easily say shit like this in a podcast that's far away from like that topic. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't, there's no one top of mind. So it's a very long-winded way to say, I don't know.
No, I'm just curious because Mike, I've said it a couple times. I'm super stoked just on the concept of it. And you have a really epic show and it's blown up. And the fact that I know you, but it's about pop punk and growing up in the scene in New Jersey. So I was just curious if like, yeah, I want to get Buddy or yeah, I want to get the dudes from Start a Line or maybe those are just the ones I want you to talk to. I want you to talk to Andrew McMahon.
Yeah, I don't think I would talk to him because Something Corporate started in like 2002, 2004, right? Like 2003, 2004?
Well, I feel like freshman year I started listening to them, so at least 2001.
So I try to get people on that at least did something in the late 90s or in the 90s.
Right.
So I also created this like
criteria,
yeah. And so I've had bands reach out to me like, hey man, would you could be on your podcast? It's like very small amounts of people, and I'm like, at one time I was like, hey, I don't want to be a dick, but you guys started in 2005. It kind of doesn't really match this thing, and you feel really bad, but I'm just like, I has to be something with that. And then, but there are some bands that I want to talk to that I've been thinking about recently, and like they started probably in the mid 2000s, and I almost want to just be like, this episode's for me, so I don't give a shit because this is my podcast and I'll do this. But I try to keep in that realm. So there's like been some random people though that I reached out to, like this guy Arlo Eisenberg. I used to be. Do you know Arlo?
I know the name. I can't remember what I've.
He was a professional. I think he still is. I don't think he's professional, but rollerblader. Yeah. Aggressive inline skater. So me and my buddies, when we grew up in the punk scene, we were rollerblader. We were aggressive inline skaters. But we would watch all the hoax videos, Harvesting the Crust. What was the one of them? There was another one that was really popular, and he was always in it. But like that's also where we heard our soundtracks. That's where we would learn about Pulley. That's where we learned about just all these fat bands and Hopeless Records bands and things like that. But I reached out to him a couple years ago because I was just like, you were the reason I found this music and some of these songs. So I want to talk to you about your life in that world. So it's so different, but it's just like a different perspective, because I've talked to roadies, I've talked to producers, I've talked to record labels and bands, zine writers. So it's like it's like, here's this little thing. Who are all these people that are looking at it, and like, what do they contribute, or what do they see? So I think he would be kind of obscure, but I would love to get, that would be so interesting to get him on. Talk about
That's
how
cool.
great I was at inline skating. No, I wasn't. I was really bad.
It's funny you said the name and I couldn't pinpoint where it was, and then you said, then it all came together. And I remember me and my buddies were tooling around in our car, or in one of my buddy's car, and there was a kid. He was rollerblading, and I rolled down the window and I yelled Arlo, and then like we got a red light, and he was like hoofing after us to try to catch up to us. I was like, go, go, go.
Yeah, it was not cool
what
to
a blast from the past.
to inline skate at all.
They used to call them fruit booters.
Yeah,
down at
I
the
remember
Jersey
that.
Shore.
Yeah, I don't think that really works these days. You might get,
No,
everyone would get canceled if you yell that out of a car.
Yeah,
People will
edit that
chase you
out,
down.
Jimmy.
Yeah.
Mike,
I can't stand the cancelers. They're fucking annoying. They're so annoying.
well, it's funny because a lot of the punk rockers became cancelers. It's like, yo, you're punk rock. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I get it with like certain things are awful, but there's some shit out there. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys? What is going on? It just, people just are so sensitive with stuff. I'm just like, ugh, come on.
One last one for you, since one of your band's name was Lane Meyer, tie it all back in. John Cusack played Lane Meyer, and another great John Cusack movie is High Fidelity. And since we've been talking about a lot of music here, I'll throw you with a little High Fidelity top 5. What are your top 5 deserted island albums?
So real quick, to bring it even back again, when I was talking about business names and business partnerships and things like that. So Sean, it was in Lane Meyer. We had he had a record store in Tampa called Top 5 Records that he named it after that. And then we did something together. We did something under that label to, what the fuck we were doing? We were doing like we did this thing called House of Merch, which Sean still does and he does really well with, but we did it under like the Top 5 umbrella. So just had to like point that out, that of how much I love that. Man, Top 5 records, fuck. I would do, trying to do this fast because I hate when someone be like, oh, 30 minutes of, well, then this one. No, I think I get it. I do Worship and Tribute by Glassjaw.
Let's go.
Balance and Composures. The things we think we're missing, things we think we need. It's the second to last album before they broke up. That's 2. Trying to think of like, actually one record I play all the time is Coldplay Parachutes. I love it. That's my Monday, because Monday is my don't go out. That sounds sad. Like I go out 6 nights a week, but Monday is my stay in, cook, listen to vinyl as I'm cooking, don't drink. So I always play Coldplay on Mondays. I think, I don't know this, I'm just gonna throw this in there because it's becoming top of mind, or just top of mind. Casey Musgraves, have you heard her album? Have you heard of her at all?
I haven't, no.
Okay, A, she's hot as fuck. B, the record that she has is the blue one. It's so good. There's a song called like it's Lonely Weekend or something. It's the second song on the record. It's really good. And I'm not a country guy at all, but it's amazing. So was that 3? Is that 4?
4.
4. And like, I'm literally looking at my records right now. Maybe Far Side, Bizarre Ride 2, maybe.
Okay.
Or Tribe Called Quest, Midnight Marauders.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, That's a great one.
Yeah.
That's great. Any hip hop is so amazing on vinyl.
Does it
it's
really
like
make
built
a
for it.
difference?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does for some reason. It's because there's like this mind. Do you guys listen to vinyl?
No.
No. There's a separation of digital in general, just really, like I say this all the time, I learned this years ago in a book. If you write down your goals or things, journaling, it fires tens of thousands of neurons in your brain, so it makes it more real. And I think it, like, if you're into the universe stuff, which I'm into, like you manifest it more. If it's digitally, there's kind of this disconnect. So I think that also digital creates this stress. And I find that when I put a record on, I literally decompress because I'm not waiting for a commercial, even though I pay for Spotify. Like I used to wait for commercials, but I always have it on shuffle. I always have to hit the next one if I don't want it. It's like it's just all your senses are there. It's like except for taste. Like you see it, you touch the record, you put it down, you're listening to it, and you don't like skip songs. It just really decompresses you. But something about old school punk rock and hip hop on vinyl is just, I don't know. There's something to it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I never got into it just with the traveling around and stuff. I didn't want to invest the money trying to lug things around. So it was one of those things that even with the CDs, I kicked myself with the amount of CDs I left
Oh
back
yeah.
in New Jersey when I first started moving around. It was like this ginormous box. And now it's like, oh man, I thought I'd have them on, because I transferred them all to digital and then that computer crashed with all the music on it. I was like,
I mean, they're all on Spotify, really.
yeah, no, but I mean, some of them, they just fall in the cracks and like there's like a helmet moment, you know what I mean? Where it's like,
I
oh
had
my
that
God,
CD.
I had that CD. I haven't heard this in 2 decades.
Yeah, that's why I love it. I mean, I've gotten more into music lately, but do you still travel around a lot? Because I know you just moved to South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I just moved. The pandemic kind of shut down a lot of my traveling and adventures, but got a couple races coming up, 1 or 2 in New Jersey throughout the next year. But I haven't. I've been thinking more about farming and growing my own food than I have about living in a van these days.
I love that, man. I'm so in like, but to you guys, just all the stuff you guys post and all the athletic things you do. I wish there was like that piece of me or the piece inside of me that was like as driven as that for anything athletic. Like I'll go work out with this guy twice a week, but then I'll go eat like an asshole afterwards. So I don't really get those gains that I want, even though I'm going to quit drinking for like 6 weeks because I've been having some stomach issues. I just want to like kind of kick it out. But like I'll see guys like you and I'm like, what the fuck? Like what is built in them where they just, I don't know. Like, do you feel if you don't do shit like that, it's stressful?
I mean, it definitely is a release in terms of the day in, day out of just, some sort of moving meditation to clear the head. For a while, sometimes looking back, it seems like sometimes it's just an escape, like to get out of like real life or being an adult. It's like, I'm going to go chase this adventure and train for 100-mile race and live in the mountains for 3 months. And,
Yeah.
So it's,
Why not?
trying to be a little bit more like a normal 46-year-old, but sometimes it still doesn't work.
Fuck that shit, man. I mean, I'm 43. I can put my light on. I'm 43 and I think that I feel young, and just because I do younger things, I think there's something to it. I don't know. I think living conventionally is fucking stupid.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, no, when I tell people I'm 46, very few people are like, "You're not 40." They're just like, "Get out of here." I'm like,
Yeah, you don't look 46.
1976.
Damn, man. Yeah, you guys both look good. Jimmy, what are you? You're in your 30s, right? Young, right?
35, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because I met you when you were like late 20s or
Yeah.
mid 20s.
Mid-20s, yeah. And
Jesus Christ.
it's funny you say like not feeling like you're 43. I have this new theory that like your 20s is really your teenage years. And like you think you're an adult, but like once you get in your 30s, you're, oh, I was a fucking idiot in my 20s. Like I was an adult. Like, and I don't know any 20-year-olds now that I consider adults. Like there's few 20-year-olds that really have their shit together. And I think it's like a fallacy in the world that like once you turn 21, you're an adult. Like, yo, you were in high school like 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's why. And I'm kind of just going on, but when I saw the whole like student forgiveness thing and like all that stuff, I was like, well, maybe if you don't tell an 18-year-old they have to decide what they want, they're not going to spend $100,000 guess and put them in debt. Like I mean, granted, I took a different path and I skipped all that. Did 2 semesters at County College in Morris, failed out. I think my parents only paid a couple grand. Toured in a van, figured out what I want to do when I was 24, and then I paid my entire way even through now. Like I kind of just took that amount of money and spread it out. Where I was like, all right, I'll do a technical school, and then later I'll do business, hire a business coach, and I'll get a sales coach. Like whatever I'm in the moment, that's when I pay people for that thing that I need to learn. Having that all happen up front before you're 20 or in your 20s, like it's fucking ridiculous. It's so stupid.
Well, you're setting kids up for failure.
It's
like
the biggest con job that we've got going on
Yeah.
in this country. One of them, scam.
Yeah, it's like let them go and live a little bit, and then find at least get somewhat of an inkling of what they want to do, and then invest in it, and then be in debt, which they want to be in, and then give them $10,000.
Mike, before we get into rapid fire, I gotta ask, cause you're from New Jersey, is it pork roll or Taylor ham?
Taylor ham, bitch.
Oh, that's that North
I
Jersey.
knew you guys. You're South Jersey. You're South Jersey motherfuckers. Yeah, I did a mug for my podcast, and it says it's Taylor ham, comma, you fuck.
I like that.
Sold a few of those.
Nice.
I got another one. You might have alluded to it earlier in the episode, but Bon Jovi or Bruce Springsteen.
I don't really like them, either of them, honestly. Like I mean, if it comes
Bouncing
on,
Souls.
if I'm Bouncing Souls, yeah, Bouncing Souls. There we go. I do like the Souls. I mean, I liked Bon Jovi when I was little. I never loved Bruce Springsteen. I mean, he's the fucking man. Someone said the other day in a podcast, they're like, it's hilarious. He calls himself the boss, where he's all about the blue collar or the blue collared workers, and he calls himself the boss. I was like, that's pretty funny. Or he's all about like, working on the docks or whatever the fuck. I would
dock on the Navasink River at his mansion.
yeah, right. He's in Deal. Yeah. I would say if I had to choose my favorite song in the two, I would choose that Fire song by Bruce Springsteen. I don't think there's any Bon Jovi song where I would be like, I'd take this seriously and listen to it. So I just can't stand that one song. He's got one song when I was in high school. I started going to the gym, I was like super skinny, and my buddy would go. So I was like just pretending I knew what the hell I was doing. And every time the football coach would come in, he'd play this one Bruce Springsteen song over and over, and I fucking hated it.
Glory Days.
It wasn't Glory Days. It was like On That. It was just it's a song that everyone loves, and I just can't stand it. I was Born to Run. Yeah, it was Born to Run. I hate that fucking song.
I feel like Rich had a similar experience.
Yeah, I feel like that would be in your realm since you were running.
No, I similar. I had not the football coach, but definitely the football players in high school. They used to play Bruce Springsteen all the time, and I was like, this is fucking lame.
Oh God, it sucked.
I always held the grudge ever since.
Yeah, that song. I mean, I'm sure it's a great song. It's not my. If it comes on, I would easily skip it if it was on Spotify.
I was the same way with Sublime for a while. Even though I love them now, I wouldn't admit that I liked them because everyone in my high school listened to them.
We used to love Sublime, kind of going back to the Arlo thing when we were watching Hoax. That's how we got introduced to 311 and Sublime. And this is before he died, and then that record just became just overplayed and insane and really annoying. Like 40 Ounces to Freedom, we heard that song, and this is like right around the time where we'd be able to start drinking if we could get it. So we just like blast that song and be drinking Budweisers or whatever we could like muster from our friend who was 21. That's what I loved. That's the Sublime that I loved. And when he got like all radio and every college kid had the poster, I was like, it's too much. Yeah. I sound like a curmudgeon. Oh, these kids.
I feel that there's a lot of bands that I use. Fall Out Boy is one of those bands that I loved. And I was like, oh, you're too big. I can't admit that I like you anymore.
No, it was more like, I don't care if a band's big. If I hear it too much, I'm like, I'm so annoyed hearing this goddamn song. It's like, I just can't do it. I'm better than everybody. Totally kidding.
Mike, are you a coffee drinker?
Oh yeah.
How do you brew your coffee and how do you take it?
I get in my car and I drive to my current favorite coffee shop is Iris in downtown Raleigh. I do cold brew. So my favorite cold brew is nitro. And I was talking to a buddy of mine today. He's a barista at this place called Benchwarmers. And he used to be at this place called Videri where they would serve coffee. And there's a big coffee crowd here. And I was talking to him today. I was like, yeah, I'm like, I don't know, dude. I drink cold brew. I can't say I'm a coffee, professional. He's like, oh, I love cold brew. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, man. He's like, you can really pick up hints of this and flavors because it's not hot. I was like, all right, I guess I'm a professional now. I'm one of the elite. Yeah, so that's how I make. I never make it. I never make it, and I probably waste so much plastic and spend so much money, but I just have to just get out in the morning because I work in my apartment all day. Like I just need to just go listen to music, listen to podcasts, drive in my Jeep. And it's like I basically am doing it for that.
Take it black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started doing that when we started doing paleo at Morristown. And I used to do cream and sugar at Dunkin' Donuts where it was like basically milk.
Yep.
And then we did the paleo challenge and I had to take it black. And I was like, but then I really started liking it. And then I just, ever since then, taking it black.
Right on. Mike, do you have any daily practices or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of yourself?
So I'm dating someone now, and we were talking the other day. I find it if I get to a point where I'm either stuck or I'm kind of going in a circle a little bit, if I find I'm being too repetitive and it's not healthy, then more like healthy meaning I don't know, going out on Sunday and like watching football and drinking too much or something like that, or eating some crappy way, or just not exercise, even though I'm paying someone, and that's like I'm guaranteed 2 days a week doing that. We were talking the day about meditation. She's like, I really want to meditate. She's like, why don't we do a challenge? So I'm really good with challenges. I've always been, if I put it out there, then I really stick with it. So we're doing a 30-day challenge of meditating. So I'm doing 11 minutes without an app. And then journaling afterwards. And so I can't say do it all the time, but that's a ritual that I'm really hoping does something. Because I was talking to someone, they were like, if you just meditated for 10, 11 minutes every day for like, I don't know, a couple months, it would just really change your brain a little bit. So that, and I do like journaling. I don't know, like getting cold brew. It's like one of my, I feel like anything that I do that makes me feel, it gives my head some space where I just don't want to feel like I'm handcuffed to my day. Like I want to just like, I'll listen to myself, like, what do I want to do right now? Like, do I want to, like, this project's due this day. I know I can make it even if I just cut this off the rest of the day and then I just do my podcast, or I just go out or like walk around town or something like that. So my ritual is usually just listening to myself and just saying like, what do I want to do right now? And sometimes you can't 100%, but sometimes you can get away with it. Like I just like to give myself that leeway, and just because it really just decompresses me. So that's my answer.
I like it. I'm gonna try to take that on a little bit.
Well, actually, really quick, one thing that I do, that the comic that I started, I always take I think I have it with me. I have 2 markers that I keep with me. These are the ones I draw in the morning, but like I have these 2 pens. They're like, what are these? Microns.
Okay.
And I buy a little sketchbook and I'll just go at a bar and I'll just doodle. Just absolutely has nothing to do. It just be like, I think everyone has that one doodle they do when they're in a meeting at work or something, that their brain they just mindlessly do it. I'll go sit at a bar, get a drink, and I'll just take out this thing in the middle, like a crowded bar, and I'll just open it and just start just doodling, just because it just literally defrags my brain. And that, I highly recommend that. Even if someone doesn't draw, it's like really therapeutic.
I feel like that probably starts conversations too.
Yeah, it does. Some people were like, it's almost like a female at a bar reading a book, It's just because they always get approached by someone and they're like, can you just let me read my book? I'm not here to get picked up or anything like that. People will be like, they're like, what are you doing? You're like, oh, I'm just drawing. Or I remember I was doodling. Yeah, I was doing that. And then this woman was sitting next to me a couple months ago and she's like, do you do like, um, what is it? Commissioned art, like drawings? I was like, yeah, sure. So she's like, oh, I was like, here's my Instagram, follow it. So she followed it and I followed hers and she's like an influencer or something like that. Which typically I can't stand influencers, but she's like very nice. It's like when you meet someone in person, you just like, oh, they're really nice. Like I'm down with you being an influencer. If you don't know them, you're like, oh God, you're so annoying.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's that started like that. And actually the girl I'm dating now, she's a bartender in town and I'd always sit at her bar and that's like struck up conversations, stuff like that. So
I knew it.
boom.
I knew it.
Dropping tips.
That's right. Hope you guys learned some information.
Going to the brewery right after this with my notepad and my Sharpies.
Tell you, man, you're gonna be like married next week.
Get my Paul check on.
Seriously.
Mike, what are you listening to right now? Music, audiobooks, podcast? Are you reading anything?
Bought a book. I haven't started reading it yet. It's about this guy who infiltrated. He went to Fish concerts and ICP concerts. And I think it's called You Don't Know Me, But You Don't Like Me. And I haven't started reading it. Someone just told me about it. And I was at everything's surrounded by bars, but I was at my local bottle shop and this guy, he recommended it. And I just immediately went on Amazon and ordered it. So I haven't read it yet. Audio book, or podcast, I just listened to Wind of Change. It's the story about how the CIA apparently wrote Wind of Change for the Scorpions.
Ooh.
Highly recommend that. It's really it's eight episodes and it's fascinating. That one like sucked me in. Music, listening to, I just bought the new Death Cab. I'm looking at it. It just came in
How
the
is
mail.
it?
It's on vinyl. It's good. It's really good. That and the one before it. I think it was the one before it. Sorry. Thank you for God, it's really memorable. Thank you for something. Like that record's really good. And so the girl I'm dating, we were listening to it and she was just like, oh, I really like this. So then I just bought it for her because she has a record player. And then I was like, well, I'll get something for myself too. So I got the new record. But listening to Spotify, that's really good. But I don't know, I just have a Spotify playlist that I listen to. And sometimes I'll go on the daily, what's that? Each week they give you like a list.
Yeah, the release radar.
Is that no, the weekly, they give you like a suggestion, Discover Weekly.
Yeah,
That's
there
it.
you go.
And I'll listen to that, and the majority of them are they're not really that great, but there's that one song that comes through and you listen to it. But yeah, I don't have like a full album I'm listening to right now. I'm sure. I mean, it's one of those where it's like going to that CD store and you forget, like back in the day.
Have you listened to the new Anthony Green album?
I have not, but did you hear LS Dunes? His collaboration with the guys from Thursday and My Chemical Romance?
I did not.
It is like heavy. They have a video out. It's
What's
awesome.
it called? Is it just
LS Dunes or something like that? But is his solo record, is it like chill or?
Oh my gosh, man. It hits me such in the vibes right now, dude. There's definitely like, it's up tempo. It's not hard though.
I'm gonna check that out.
It's called Done Boom. There's
Okay.
like, I would say there is 4 or 5 like solid songs on there. There's probably about 10 or 12 songs, but there's 4 or 5 that really stand out.
Okay, I'm checking that out. Boom Done.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, I love Anthony Green. Circus Survive. Oh, I would do Juturna as one of my records. I would replace that with something.
That's a
That
solid
record,
one.
so good. It's so fucking good.
Mike, last one. I appreciate you mentioning that Wind of Change. I'm definitely going to take a deep dive in that as I'm cooking my dinner when we jump off here.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the CIA. Our last question is, do you have a favorite conspiracy theory?
Yeah, my favorite one is, I was talking about this today. There's a theory that JFK was shot accidentally by one of the Secret Service guys because he fell in the car because they hit a bump and the guy shot him from behind by accident.
Okay.
Is that there's an actual documentary on like Netflix or Amazon where they break it down. This guy presented the theory, and you go through it and you're like, this seems kind of legit, because why would they cover it up so much? Because the reason I think they would, I mean, I don't think it's real, but it kind of makes you think, well, the reason they wouldn't want people to know that is because that would make us look like fucking idiots, and it would make us look like a weak power. So we already look weak because we just let our president die. But imagine if some guy who just like went like this with his gun and shot him. But they go through it and you're like, this seems like it could actually be legit. So
I'll check that one out. I have heard people talk about that they believe that it was one of the people in the front seat, the driver, that shot him. But
his brains went forward.
We had a guest on, Jay Widener, last year. He went into a whole thing how he thought it was a prosthetic and everything. It's amazing. It was kind of interesting about the information he gave on it.
The when to change thing, it's amazing because the guy at one point goes, he goes, I was talking to a friend about this, and my friend goes, well, don't you believe that you're actually feeding into this conspiracy and actually making a conspiracy theory? The guy's like, oh wow. He goes, once you're in it, there's really no right or wrong ever. You just live in this space and you can never get out of it, because it's just anything. If you let it sound real, it can be. It's just whatever you perceive as being truthful or not. So
yeah,
that was pretty interesting. But
Mike, before we get you out of here, where can everyone find you? Where do you want us to send everyone to? What can they look forward to?
check out, if you're in the late 90s, early 2000s punk scene, check out This Was the Scene. And I have on my Instagram, I have it pinned to the top. I have a spreadsheet that I took photos of, and it has every single episode minus 6 of them of all the people I've talked to. And I've actually boosted that as a Instagram ad, and it gets me so many followers because it's like, why is there a list in front of me? And then they read it, and I direct it at punk rock, like their punk rock and emo likes, and people like it, and then they follow me, and they're like, holy shit, I just found this, I read this list. So there's another little
Thanks for the pro tip.
little tip. That was like accidental. I was like, wait, I should do this. So This Was the Scene. It's also on Instagram. I post all the time. I do a lot of reels, and it's all just anything I find, it's all dedicated to that time. I have a web comic called Daily Bred. So you check it out, Your Daily Bred, BRED. I just draw a daily comic of just this character saying whatever's in my mind randomly.
It's fucking hilarious, by the way.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's like you do it all the time. You're like, that's some duds, but I don't know, but I feel like if I make myself laugh, then like that's all I care about. And then I have drive80.com. It's my animation company for companies who need to explain what they do in 60 seconds, and they're sick of spending hour-long sales meetings trying to explain their product or service. So I do an explainer video, 60 or 90 seconds, and it's drive80, drive80.com.
Awesome catching up, brother. Great conversation. Got me in all the feels. And I keep doing your thing, dude. I love following you. You're solid. Always, got new stuff coming out. Always just cranking out content. It's good to know you and know you're out there doing your thing.
Same, man. You guys always inspire me. I'm always impressed by all the stuff you guys do. Like legit. Every time I see something, I'm like, fuck. I need to be not be like, I wish I had that little bit in me to do that. So I really appreciate
other avenues.
Yeah,
that's true, man. Everyone needs that release, but I think mine would be better if it was running 10 miles instead of having 10 bourbons.
just go for a walk. That's all it is, man. Just go for a walk.
I got my Go Ruck. I just walk with that.
There you go.
All right, guys. I really appreciate it, man. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it was good chatting with you, Mike. Glad we finally got to have a conversation in real life.
I know, face to face after many years.
Yeah.
All right, dudes.
Have a great night.
Thank
you
you.
too. Later.